And welcome to this episode of Season 5 of the Dr. Tech Show, where myself, Pauline Roche, and Sweyn Hunter, and often guests, as we have today, Harry Harrold, talk about digital topics, including the world of online communications and digital inclusion, in a show which was the brainchild of digital storyteller, the late John Popham. And as ever, we do a weather check at the beginning. Harry, welcome to the show. How has the weather been this week where you are?
It's been pretty good. I had the joy of a sunny, dry weekend. So I've spent most of the weekend up to my wrists in earth on the allotment, which is a great pleasure of mine.
Oh, nice, very nice. Well, here in Birmingham, oh, sorry, I forgot to ask where you are, where you're from, coming from,
Oh,
Harry?
Norwich.
Okay, cool.
Norwich.
Well, here in Birmingham, it rained a little bit, but I did manage to get out. I went to see friends and went to the pictures, see a very curious film called Bird, starring Barry Keegan, Irish actor. And yesterday I was swimming in 7 degrees of very cold water, at a place called Water's Edge with some friends and also having a sauna, which was very, very nice. Compliment to the weather. Sweyn is with us today, but his throat isn't too good, so we're letting him off. But he, as usual, he's in Orkney and joining us from there. So we'll go straight into some dates that we've got to share and some events, and then we'll come on to to talk to Harry, our special guest. So the first day that we picked up is on the 20th of December, which is International Human Solidarity Day, a day to celebrate our unity in diversity, a day to remind governments to respect their commitments to international agreements, to raise public awareness of the importance of solidarity, to encourage debate on the ways to promote solidarity for the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals, including poverty eradication, and a day of action to encourage new initiatives for poverty eradication. Solidarity is identified in the Millennium Declaration as one of the fundamental values of international relations in the 21st century, wherein those who either suffer or benefit least deserve help from those who benefit most. Consequently, in the context of globalization and the challenge of growing inequality, strengthening of international solidarity is indispensable. So the UN General Assembly proclaimed 20th of December as International Human Solidarity Day. And there are various initiatives around the UN, and the link will be in the YouTube video that we goes up after the program. Moving on, the month of December is UK Disability History Month, an annual event to raise awareness about disabled people's fight for equality and human rights, an opportunity to reflect on the progress made for disability rights and to act on what we can do to support disability equality in the present. For example, workplaces can host webinars on disability history and reflect on what they can do to improve their policies to promote disability inclusion. And in the UK, the month started on the 14th of November and continues until the 20th of December. In 2010, a motion making the month an official awareness event was passed in the UK Parliament, signed by 79 MPs, and we welcome that initiative. Everyone can celebrate. Everyone, either knows somebody who's disabled or themselves may become less able as the years wear on. So the disability employment rate actually has yet to return to its pre-pandemic level, and the disability employment rate in 2024, the second quarter, was 6.9% compared to 3.6% for non-disabled people. So obviously there's still barriers to overcome, and we would like to do all we can to help overcome them. Some events that we know are happening around this time. Lots of things happening tomorrow, the 17th of December. The first one we picked up was a one called Computer and Digital Skills, Beginner Stream Full Day, according to the blurb I picked up from Eventbrite. That's a workshop split into three sections. The first one being ICT for beginners, perfect for those who are completely new to computers and devices and want to learn how to use them in a simple and friendly way. And there's still thousands of people in the UK who fall into that category. And so tomorrow they can learn how to turn on a computer and use basic controls like a mouse and keyboard, navigating the home screen and finding applications, connecting to the internet safely and securely, and understanding how to search for information online. There's also, as part of the day, an introduction to online services, and some basic email skills. Again, lots of people don't know how to set up an email account, so they can be taught how to do that, write, send, and reply to emails. Adding attachments, often a skill that people struggle with, especially if they're older people who haven't grown up with the internet the way some younger people have. And then, of course, understanding email security and how to avoid phishing scams. We're always very conscious that getting people online is one thing, but keeping them safe online needs to be a corollary to all of that. Tomorrow as well, an UnConference, one of the topics close to my heart and Harry's, of course, as well. Tomorrow in Birmingham, sustain the Midlands for Sustainability UnConference. And this is for professionals who are passionate about change in business and sustainability and want to create a better world for tomorrow. You're invited to join the conversation with like-minded individuals committed to making a positive impact on how we think and perceive the world by just developing sustainable ways of working in business and beyond. The core purpose of the UnConference is to provide a day for sharing experiences and learning from those with wisdom and knowledge about the tough choices we all may face. Start forming new alliances, build a network, don't be afraid to ask questions, and most importantly, inspire the next generation to make positive changes. So it sounds like a very beneficial event. I know they're expecting several hundred people, because I was talking to one of the people involved yesterday. So hopefully they get the numbers that they're hoping for. And a couple more events. Tomorrow, 11 to 2, an event called Hidden Stories stroke Digitising Resources. And this is an event that's happening in Wales. The event blurb says we can support people to upload their photographs, sound recordings, documents, videos, and stories to the People's Collection Wales website. If people have specific memories or experiences, including of democracy, protests, campaigns, voting, etc., which they would like to share, they can be supported to create digital content, e.g., videos, music, podcasts, and music, and uploaded to the People's Collection Wales website. I really liked that one. I thought John would have liked that as an idea of collecting stories because he was always very keen on storytelling, and that's something I would like to see myself. And I always try and encourage people to get involved in adding to the digital memory, digital history of the world, including Wikipedia. So good stuff that's happening. And our final event from our friends at Clear Community Web, Casper, Kennerdale et al., are having a new monthly series, Being Safer Online. And this was one I picked up on X, Twitter. They're inviting people to join them at the Woodside Community Hub for their new monthly series, Being Safer Online. And some of the things they're going to be talking about is how to master passwords, how to protect yourself from scams, and how to understand online privacy. So good luck to Casper with that, and we look forward to talking to Casper again in the new year. He's a regular visitor on our show, and we always love talking to him. Okay, and today we welcome our new guest to the show, Harry Harrold, the head of Neontribe. Neontribe is a digital agency committed to tech for good and part of the DXW family. Harry has worked as a user researcher and product manager, and currently he's proudest of his work convening UK Charity Camp. Harry, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Pauline.
How are you today?
I'm very well. Yes, as I mentioned, out of the allotment at the weekend with the massive variety of people who are on that allotment from all parts of the world. Yeah, really refreshing, really good.
And what's the kind of end of the year looking like for you as regards work?
Oh, as regards work, I've picked up a couple of small pieces of user research which have to be done by Christmas.
Ah,
Obviously, ideally, I would have picked those up last week or the week before, but there are projects that need that sort of user-centered focus, and I'm always happy to deliver that.
mm. So if someone who's not familiar with the term user research, how would you explain it to, the average person in the street?
It's about talking to people and listening, and not talking to people who are particularly well versed in technology necessarily, or people who are part of the organization you're working with, but actual real people, people who will actually use the websites and web services that we are building, just to get a good view of what they need.
Hmm. And what kind of results would you hope for, and what kind of effects would that tend to have on the work that you're doing, or the work other
So
people is doing?
we spend a lot. I spend a lot of my time facilitating semi-structured interviews. So we have a bunch of questions which are about the project, but we don't let that list of questions become a script. We make sure we get to understand what we need to understand about these people. But if the conversation goes in a particularly interesting direction for the project that's not on the script, that's where it goes.
Mm,
The key thing is that we don't There's a couple of things people aren't always very good at. I mean, I, for example, I'm not very good at future prediction of what I will do because the future is like a foreign country and they do things differently there. So we don't ask people what they would use on a website. We ask them what they have used most of the
Mm.
time. We tend not to ask people what they want. We try and work out what they need. So we're looking at user needs rather than user wants. And
Mm.
we're looking at past behavior as an indication of the future rather than imagining people to dream.
And can you give me an example of, a website or a product that you've worked on that where you've done some user research and it's, how you've changed things or made things better?
Yeah, so well, I mean, every time I do a user research in an interview, somebody says something which makes my jaw drop. But this is a particular story from quite a long time ago now. This is a story of a website we were producing for a young people's project. I'm not going to go into any more details, but we ended up. This is so far back that we ended up traveling across the country with a an old iMac. Well, at the time it was a modern iMac, one of the flat screen iMacs. And we took this all the way across the country. We set it up in part of an organization's office. We invited young people to sit in front of this iMac and use a web property. And I sat and I watched as they used the web property. And I asked one of my prompting questions, which was at the time was, how easy is this to use? And the person, and that's not a terribly good question. Now I'd have gone on from there, but it was a good prompting question because the person said, "Oh, it's very easy to use." At one and the same time, I could see their hand moving the mouse around the screen, trying to find the button to do the next job they wanted to do.
Mm.
And I took from that that we should probably move that button, make it a different color, do all that kind of thing. The
Okay.
other story is from a commercial project I was on. We were working on a piece of human resources software for an American airline, and it was being reported to us that people found it hard to use. I thought, well, that's irritating. So we went and we did some in-person user research, and I watched as cabin crew tried to use this piece of software, and they couldn't really use the buttons. And I watched in amazement as some of these cabin crew used not the tip of a finger, but the back of a finger, of the second joint of the finger, because their fingernails were so long and beautiful that they couldn't press small areas of the screen. And we went home and we made the buttons bigger and more lozengey and less round. And
Mm.
that was one of those moments without in-person user research.
Mm-hmm.
I would never have spotted that that might be a usability problem.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because button size is a usability problem for many different sorts of people. So if you have difficulties controlling the movements of your fingers, you would have that same problem. And I
Mm.
think it's a really interesting thing to me that we talk about accessibility and we talk about usability and we talk about people with lived experience that makes these things, that makes using web properties hard. And what we don't always remember is that we, all of us, are temporarily able-bodied. If we're
Yeah.
able-bodied right now, we are all of us temporarily
Mm.
able-bodied, and we can disable ourselves in a variety of ways. And one of those ways appears to be having such long fingernail extensions that you can't hit a small button.
Mm.
And there's a
And
truism. There's
mm.
a truism, aphorism. There's a word. There's a good sentence which says accessible design is good design. And
Mm.
I try and think of that all the time
Mm.
when I'm
Yeah.
doing bits and pieces of user research because it's true. Because
Mm.
all of my experience of user testing suggests that when you make a piece of design accessible, you're making it better for everyone.
Yeah. I have a friend who's got cerebral palsy, and he often, posts on Facebook how difficult he's finding certain websites or certain services because he takes longer to speak, and a lot of services don't allow for a longer pause between sentences or between words. And he often finds, especially with public sector websites and phone, calls he's making that he gets cut off because they can't they're not built to wait for someone whose speech patterns are different.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
fascinating.
yeah.
And the designers of those systems probably imagine that a voice powered interface will be more accessible because you do
Mm,
not have to use a keyboard, and you might have trouble using a keyboard for whatever reason, visual impairment, whatever. And your friend finds exactly the opposite.
yeah, yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah, they often can't understand what he's saying. And yeah, he gets cut off because they think he's messing about or whatever. It's an ongoing problem for him, and I'm sure for a lot of other people with speech impediments, and for people who English is not their first language.
Yeah, for sure.
I would think it's quite a common thing. So yeah, I mean, I think user research is great. I just know that in the voluntary sector where I do most of my work, people feel like they don't either they don't have never heard of it or they can't afford it. It's not something that gets built into contracts generally. I've never seen it on a contract for a voluntary organization. So, yeah, I'd be concerned that things are getting developed and users are not being asked how easy
Yep.
or difficult they're finding things. And then
So
people wonder why services aren't being used as well, as they might be.
yeah, and you raise a very interesting point. Well, two very interesting points in one sentence. The first one is that user research is great. However, you have to remember that the people you have spoken to are not all people. And you need to remember not only the feedback you're getting from those individuals, but also how other individuals, because you cannot reach everyone. As you
Mm,
say, budgets are limited. The other thing is that I find user research is useful in and of itself as an engagement activity. So for organizations whose aim is to engage with a community of people, then bringing those people in to do user research not only gets you the good stuff user research gets, but also engages with those people, brings them closer to your organization, and shows them that you really mean it when you
mm,
say that you
mm,
are for that community. So
yeah.
listening and user research does not have to be expensive. You don't. It's a team sport, and there are some excellent books which can get you started on user research. And the one I most remember is Erica Hall's Just Enough Research, which I
Mm,
recommend to your attention. And if we could
okay.
get a link to that put in a chat somewhere, that would be brilliant.
I'm sure Sweyn
That's
is
one.
looking for it as we speak.
Yeah, that's really
Yeah,
good.
yeah, just enough research. That's good. I mean, we always want to recommend free or low cost resources to people
Ah,
from the show because that's a classic one. Yeah, like Lou Downs' book on good design, that one,
of course.
that's one we
Yes.
love as well. Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. And
you
so you
smile
should.
as if were you involved in that in some way, or is that one of
No, it's
your,
just Lou
no?
Down is one of the poster children of this generation, right? That they are
Yeah.
one of the people who made us what we are today.
Okay, and Swain is
Yes,
bringing.
and
Oh, here we
also
are. Just enough
I
research.
was
Swain's got it up on the screen now. Yeah.
yeah, I was trying to think if I had another a low cost or free alternative on my mind, but I don't, I'm afraid. I will try and think of a good first primer if I
Mm,
possibly can. But actually, the blog on that site will probably do you very well indeed.
mm. Yeah, it's getting people started, I suppose. Like, as you've, I'm sure, knew before anyway, but also had reinforced at UK Charity Camp, which we will talk about at length, I'm sure.
Mm.
Um, you know, the budgets in the voluntary sector are much smaller, tighter than the public and private sector. So people tend to kind of go for the thing that'll work they feel will work the quickest. That spending time on developing things. Time is our major currency in the sector. And unless you can show or guarantee that spending time developing something will make a difference, then it's hard to get people to do other than the delivery of the services that they're doing. What's been speaking of charity camp anyway? What have kind of been your learning points? You've done two of them now. One most recently, this
Yep.
year's most recently. What do you think you learned that you weren't expecting that you had
So
reinforced?
about the event as a whole, um, we did some experiments. The first one about making the event itself inclusive. So, unlike some open space unconferences have a pitch line. So I mean, you know about unconferences, but the idea is that the agenda of an unconference is set by the people who go, not
Yeah.
by the organisers. There are places and times to have conversations rather than a set agenda of people who are quite often beardy blokes standing at the front giving their wisdom to the masses like Moses for the mountaintop. And I had always thought that the chances of that one person knowing more about their subject than everyone in the room were pretty slim. There are people that do, but I prefer unconferences because you start with a blank grid and the people who are there set the agenda. However, that has a weakness, which is that it unfairly prioritizes people like me, loud, confident performers. And I am very happy standing in front of a room of 100 people and giving myself or whatever. However, in an unconference, you want to prioritize the voices of everyone, particularly those who are not often heard. And the way in which we decided to do that was rather than have a pitch line and rather than requiring everyone to stand up and say, I would like to talk about this subject, we would just say, write it on a post-it note, stick it on this table at the front, we will do the rest.
Mm.
And so people don't have that awful moment of having to prove the popularity of your idea in front of a room full of people, many of whom you've never met. So our pitching is just a pile of post-its and we organise the grid from there. And that, I wish I had the sums. What I do have is a datum, which is that we, at the most recent unconference, UK Charity Camp unconference, we had 61 ideas for conversations out of something like 90 people present, which struck me as a lot higher a ratio of things I want to talk about than other unconferences.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I'm not saying that everyone should use this format, but by golly, just the fact that lots of people say, this is the thing I want to talk about, partly because they don't have to stand up in front of lots of people, that for me is that's a really inclusive moment. And I think we learned that, we tested that at the first UK charity camp, and we've done it at the second one, and that's gold, I think.
Mm. Mm.
The other thing we don't do is we don't have a popularity contest for sessions. So we have places to have conversations that are of different sizes, awkwardly. Some unconferences have a show of hands to see how popular a conversation is going to be, and then the organisers put that conversation in the right size of room. We don't do that because I am pretty confident that most people don't want to be voted on in front of their peers. And that does have the disadvantage that on a couple of occasions, we put a session in the wrong size of room and it was a bit crowded.
Mm.
But I think the plus side, which is no one gets judged by anyone, is worth it.
Mm-hmm.
So those
The,
are all good things.
the other thing that we talked about at the last one when I arrived slightly late was there was no names on the session list, and often I think again that's a bit of a popularity contest. Oh, X is running this session, so therefore I must go to that. Whereas for UK Charity Camp, it definitely feels like that's good information. That's a good kind of session. I'm interested in that topic. I'll go to that, and we'll see who else turns up. And I have to admit, Harry, confess maybe. I did for a couple of the sessions that I went to. I didn't pitch any sessions. It was great. I just rocked up and went to several interesting sessions. Um, I did recruit a few people to one session that was in the afternoon that I thought would be really useful if they were in the session. But they had a choice of coming or not coming, and I think they found it useful. So I suppose for the more experienced on-conference attendee, um, you like myself, you might recruit a few friends to come to something that you
Yeah.
think would be useful. But that's not a terrible thing either. It's
I mean,
oh, yeah,
let's join this conversation is a perfectly reasonable thing to say to a
yeah,
collection of like-minded folk. I think the one thing that we didn't do last time, which in hindsight we should have done, is say if you've suggested a conversation, it's on the grid, please turn up.
Yeah.
because there was one session which I went to where the person who did it, who suggested it, and I don't know who they were, but they didn't go because they found something more interesting to talk about. Now, I mean that should be fine, but I sat there on my own for a bit and then thought, oh, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
So we should probably think of something like that, I think. And there's some other improvements we will make next time as well, I'm sure. We've had the retro. I haven't written it up yet. I'll write a blog post about things we're going to do slightly differently. One thing, but as a spoiler for those who will never get, why should they read my blog post? We are going to put more effort into getting note takers because there were some interesting conversations which had no notes. One in
Mm.
particular, which I really wish I could have been at, AI for fundraising. I only
Uh-huh.
know what was talked about secondhand by people who were there rather than having like a set of notes. So we'll try a bit harder to do that. The other thing we will do is we will make sure we choose a quieter pub to go to afterwards.
Mm. Good luck with that in Birmingham. But
Well,
yeah,
I'll give
if
it my
it's in
best shot,
Birmingham,
right?
yeah. I mean,
Pauline.
I really appreciate that it's happened in Birmingham because, as you know, it's the center of the world, or center of the UK anyway for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, that if that it's not in London, actually speaks volumes as well. I know that was a conscious decision of yours. Do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, I absolutely do. So we decided not to have it in London, partly because everything's in London, but also because we felt that if people from London-based organisations decided to go, and then something came up, if they'd booked their train tickets to go to Birmingham, they probably would go.
Mm.
Whereas if something comes up and it's a choice between going to the office in London or going to an event in London, you might just sort of go to the office and get your work done. And in times when the third sector is under such pressure, then we like to encourage we like to encourage people to go to this event because it is at least partly a I'm not going to say safe space because all I can do is try and make the space safer. I'm not going to say echo chamber because that's pejorative. However, I'll expand on my point and hopefully you'll work out what I'm saying because I'll try and be clearer. People who work in digital are often part of a small team or even on their own or in a siloed organization. And around them, they might not have much support. They might not have people who say, "Yep, you're doing the right thing. I know it's difficult, but this is how it works, and this is the way in which it works." And part of the impetus for UK Charity Camp was to give people a space where many lots of digital people could come together and say, "Yep, yep, check in, yep. Oh, learn a new thing." But this is fundamentally the core of what I'm doing is the right thing to do. And
Mm.
that healing is a very grandiose term for it. And if I could think of a word that meant like healing, but not quite so much, I would use that. But I hope it's a refreshing change of pace to come and talk and to get some good practice rather than grind at your work.
Mm. Well, the people I from Birmingham that I was, knew who were there, as well as I knew a lot of other people, obviously, through my networks. They who hadn't been to whose only experience of conferences had been the one that I organized earlier this year for the neighborhood network schemes. They were really impressed with. I think they wouldn't have come had they not been to a previous one because it can be
Mm,
kind of a scary thing to come to if you don't identify with digital as your prime identity, and a lot of people don't who work in kind of charities, then it can be a bit scary or kind of you just think it's not for you. It's a typical digital thing, really. But I think they all found it very inspiring, and they want to do more, and they feel challenged by it, which is great because we always want people to learn and grow. Um, so I think it's working really well. Looking at kind of on conferences generally, you've been involved in other on conferences kind of throughout down the
yep,
years. What was
yep.
your first one, and what are the ones are you involved in still?
Um, UK GovCamp, like the grandma of them all, was the first one I went to in 2008, which was the
Uh-huh.
second of those. I think I mean it's more than a decade ago, and I've slept since. I'm pretty sure 2008 was the first one I went to. It was in a basement of the Ministry of Justice, and myself and a friend of mine rocked up with really no business being there. We were just like web developers who'd done some work for Channel 4 at the time, and we showed up, and I was told, and this is daunting, and this isn't true either. I was told that at your first unconference, you were honour bound to suggest a session. So me and my mate said, "All right, we've got to do this. Fine." And I said, "We ran a session called Agile Procurement. What's that?" And because we didn't know, we thought it'd be interesting to talk about it. And some folk did show up and talk about it, and they all knew much more about it than we did. So it was a great session.
Win.
But it turns out that 10 years later, 12, 17, a lot of years later, we are still having conversations about how you do procurement better. And
Mm,
that's true not only in the public but also in the third sector as well.
yeah, definitely.
It's tricky stuff. Buying
Yeah.
things turns out to be
Mm,
hard. Who knew?
mm. So yeah, I mean, UK GovCamp was one of the first. I think that's where you and I met actually,
Yeah, yeah.
several
But
years ago now. Yeah.
also I've been to local GovCamp, which spun out of UK GovCamp. That's a favourite. I've taken time off that in since the pandemic, but I'll be there again next year, I hope.
Mm,
UK Health Camp was an NHS focused one, which was really good value. The people who were doing the NHS Alpha showed up to that the first year it was. That was good. But those are the ones I mostly go to, I think.
mm.
Those
And do
those four.
you, for people who kind of aren't familiar with the format and the kind of the regularity of them and how many of them are there, I've got a list somewhere. Um, do you think that actual change happens, or is there a lot of I'm going to meet my pals and I'll see people I know and I'll maybe do
Yeah,
something useful?
there is a chunk of meeting my pals, but that has the value of that sort of echo chamber support network that I spoke about. So I'm a big fan of actually doing that because I think support in your work life is important. In terms of actual change, I know for a fact that a large charity, their head of digital, told me that their favourite thing about UK Charity Camp was they came away with actionable change.
Hmm.
So I know people have said they came out with actionable change. Whether or not they've carried it through, I haven't tracked. And actually, that's a really good session idea for a future UK charity camp. Thinking about it,
Hmm.
yeah, interesting.
Yeah. Well, one a mutual friend of ours, James Cattell, is I think writing a book about on conferences. I know he's organized a lot in his work life as well,
Yeah, right.
up to previously. So I think he's working on a bit on that. So that'll be interesting to see when it comes out. Um, but talking about your kind of early career in digital, what brought you into it? What was your early
I
career
mean,
like?
like many people, my first job, I came out of uni straight into the teeth of a recession. My
Mm.
first job was running a restaurant. I did that for 3 years, and then got a job in marketing, and then in 1996 got a job marketing in the internet. This is like back in the day where the internet didn't really have pictures. You had to download them and make them into GIFs. So I have been around for a while, and I had 7 years in fintech. Fintech was a thing even then. Fintech using
Mm.
crypto was a thing even then. I sold financial services software to banks for 7 years. We got bought out by a large American tech company, and then the dot-com crash happened, and I got made redundant in the teeth of another recession. And I messed around for a bit doing bits of content management work, and then came across two friends of mine who had started a thing called Neontribe, and they'd picked up a project that they couldn't do on their own. And I joined them to deliver a project for Channel 4 Education, aimed at making young people making aimed at enticing young people to think for themselves and about themselves on the internet. And we delivered MySpace apps.
Mm.
That is how long ago it was.
Wow.
But that started us into tech for good. And around the same time UK GovCamp happened, there was a conference called Together '08, where a number of people who have since gone on to do much greater things than I have, came together in somewhere in London. I can't remember where. It's where I first met Tim Davis, who is
Mm.
now internationally renowned open data person, and at
Yeah.
the time was working in youth services. But that, I think, is probably where it started. And there was this marvelous social network which started at the same time where anybody could follow anybody and deliver 144 characters of wisdom or hope into
Yeah.
the ether, and marvelous conversations started. And I made it my business to follow people who I wanted to work with,
Mm.
and Neontribe sort of took off the back of that. I don't know what happened to that site. I mean, probably. So I left Twitter that became X about 3 months ago, and I'm now on Blue Sky.
Mm. And how are things going there? Are you finding
Uh,
community?
numbers are rocketing. Community
Mm.
hasn't quite caught up yet. There are some fabulous people who are skying about really. Rachel Caldicott is the person I
Mm.
would recommend everyone follow.
Yeah.
If you find me, I've got a list of every charity I can find on Blue Sky and every charity person I can find on Blue Sky, which is a way of finding out some people to start following. But yeah, it is not yet what that bird-related site was. However, the numbers of people involved, I think it's going to happen.
Mm.
Um, and I'd recommend, even if all you do is just grab your name and your organization's name, I would do that sharpish.
Yeah.
Otherwise, someone else will.
Yeah. Yeah. No, we've talked about it a bit on the show already, and in other networks, and yeah, people are being encouraged to do that, especially because the other previous site you mentioned has certainly got negative attributes now that it didn't have before. And Rachel is a brilliant person, and yeah, we often quote things she's written as well because she writes. She's kind of a future thinker. She kind of can see what's coming, and she's traveling all over the place talking about AI and various things. And I
I
love her.
think she's made my favorite comment on AI, which is FOMO is not a strategy.
That's a very good one. And also, I like a
Just
let's
beautiful.
make AI work for 8 billion people, not 8 billionaires.
Yeah,
Which
that's nice. That's
I
nice.
think that really gets to people. I wore that T-shirt at an event I chaired for funders actually on AI recently, and I didn't make any comment, but somebody noticed it and picked it up at the end for on feedback, so they liked that. So
Yeah.
the messages are getting out there, which is great.
I'm
Um,
sure you've had sessions on AI on here, and you will have many more in the future, but the impact of AI on the charity world, I think already is profound and is going to get even more so. At the moment, I think the impact is partially that everyone in digital is being asked what their AI strategy is.
yeah,
And to my mind, follow Rachel
yeah,
and use AI purposefully, and other people can do the experimentation, is what I
mm,
would say right now,
yeah,
because you can spend
yeah,
a lot of time and effort experimenting about something, and many of those experiments only need to be done once, and it
mm,
doesn't have to be you that does them.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot of people doing good work. The Civic AI, there's a big WhatsApp group with lots of people talking about Civic AI, which is very popular. I'm sure you know about that.
Mm.
Um, it is the topic of conversation at anything digital I go to these days. People asking me what I think of it. Um, and yeah, having the conversation is very important. It's a standing agenda item on a community digital skills network meeting that I convene
Hmm.
for my work. And yeah, we keep coming back to it. There were several sessions at UK Charity Camp about
They
AI,
were.
which
Yep.
unsurprisingly, a couple of people said, "Oh God, I didn't," I was hoping that wouldn't arise, but of course it did because that's what people want to talk about. Did you go to any of those? I know you said you missed one. Did you go to any of them that occurred on the day?
No, I didn't. I was in other
Mm,
places during those.
mm,
I've picked up some of the learnings from some people's Blue Skies and LinkedIn coverage. The one I
mm-hmm,
didn't go to, which I really really do regret, is AI in funding,
mm,
because it is my fear that, firstly, charities will use, and I know this is happening. It's not my fear. This is what's going on. Charities will use AI to fill out long funding forms,
yeah,
and it will save time, and it will lower the bar to entry, and you won't have to employ a funder, and those are all good things. But you will produce an AI written fundraising
mm,
application,
mm,
and then funders will use AI to read the fundraising applications.
yeah,
And I can't help thinking there must be a better way of doing it.
mm. Yeah.
The only reason for fundraising forms is to get the money to the right places to support the right people. And can we not do better? So that's something I want to
Yeah.
investigate this year.
Well, I know CAST is convening groups of funders because my West Midlands Funders Network colleagues have been to some of their meetings, and as I say, I chaired a meeting for the West Midlands Funders Network on AI recently, so I know funders themselves are thinking about this, about will they accept bids that have obviously been written by AI? Will they have a tick box that says, we haven't used AI for
Well,
this form or whatever?
the public sector are already putting that checkbox in. There are
Mm,
some public sector procurement frameworks where that checkbox already exists. But
mm.
I think we can do better.
Yeah, and I think people may well tick the boxes as we haven't used AI, but they will, and they'll just get more clever at making it look like humans and stuff. So
I
that horse is bolted, I think.
I bet you a shiny pound that people have checked that box because they've thank you. I bet you a shiny pound that people have checked that box and delivered a fundraising application which has been spell checked or which has been grammar checked
Mm,
or. So,
yeah,
it's that pervasive. That's already pervasive.
yeah. For those who may not have been able to see the image that Swain brought up just now, it was a cartoon showing what AI does, what people think AI will do. So enjoy that when you always bring it up again, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the top person is somebody, hang on, SAD engineers with a pile of complexity languages, tool chains, infra, and the arrow then goes to apps, which is I can't read the top part of the screen, Swain, but
I
it's
think fundamentally
what
it's complexity makes engineers sad, but they have to do the work. And
uh,
the next thing is the utopia where AI means you don't have to think about the complexity. That's the utopia. And what's actually going to happen is sad engineers looking at a new pile of complexity and AI in between them and the old pile of complexity, which still exists.
mm,
Um, I'm hoping we can do a bit better than that. But yeah, but yes, you're right. So I mean, AI is the conversation which is overtaking every other conversation, and there are other conversations to be had. What one that interests me is that forms. I mean, I'm a big fan of making forms delightfully usable,
mm,
and this actually goes back to the fundraising conversation we just had. Um, Given what we can now do, can we not just not have forms? Can we just have smaller forms? And that is starting to happen in the public sector, and that's what I think, and in fact that's probably what everyone thinks should happen. Fewer forms, please. If we've got artificial intelligence, if we've got linked up data, fewer forms. That ain't rocket science. Everyone says that.
fewer forms, so you're asking less questions, or just fewer forms generally to process stuff.
Both.
Mm, okay, okay, let's think about that. Um, actually, Harry, I wanted to ask you, did you ever meet John Popham on
I
your
did.
digital life?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
I absolutely did. He was at the first local gov camp I went to. And I believe he was I went to an event in Birmingham at the custard factory, and I believe he was there too.
Mm. Any memories, any stories particular that you have of him?
I honestly can't deliver it. I mean, I think I
Mm.
probably only met the guy once, but I can just
Okay.
remember that session, that Birmingham event, was just inspirational and also a beautiful venue. So you see, I'm quite a fan of Birmingham,
Yeah.
even though I come from
Good.
Norwich, and it's almost impossible to get from Birmingham to Norwich cleanly. My son is visiting university friends in Birmingham at the moment, and it's his
Okay.
first big long train journey on his own, as far as I can remember. So I hope he gets back okay. But he's having a
Yeah, there's
fine old time in Birmingham, as far as I can work out.
there's been a few issues with the trains there recently. There was an event I was at on Thursday, and people had to either not come, they weren't able to come, or they had to leave early because Avanti weren't playing ball. But yeah, it
It, it's
mostly it works.
it's worth mentioning actually that there were some people didn't get to UK charity camp because Euston was a mess that day.
Oh, right.
And that's the only thing which might make people think perhaps we should have it in London because yeah, it's tough. It is tricky when the infrastructure of the country is held together by gaffer tape and
Mm,
string.
yeah.
Um, then it makes it more complicated to run events outside
Mm,
places where most people are.
mm. So again, looking back at the kind of early days of your career in digital, what do you think
Mm,
has changed now? Were the things you foresaw or things you wanted to happen that have happened, or how's it looking now for you?
golly. Um, that's a brilliant question. I wish I'd had a brilliant answer to that question. Um, Increasing fragmentation of the social space makes getting to people um, harder, I think. And that, yeah, I guess I imagined that these social networks would link up better than they have. And I didn't really think what the results of capitalism would be, which is you keep walls between your people and those other people because you want your people to stay with you and get monetized.
Mm,
And I think that's one thing. Um, Also in digital, I think there's something about digital inclusion where the answer isn't digital. So the GDS were very proud of saying they wanted to build services which are so good everyone prefers to use them, and they were digital by default. And I wholeheartedly agree with making service accessible because, as I've said before, accessible design is better for everyone. But I think what is occasionally forgotten is that digital by default implies there is an alternative. Otherwise, it's digital everywhere. And I would like to see the digital alternative given as much love, care, and attention as the digital.
yeah,
And I would like the choice to use digital to be an active choice, and you use it because it is better, faster, simpler, rather than using it because you have to,
yeah.
and then finding it is not good enough for you.
Hmm.
So I think that's one of the things I would like to see.
Yeah. And that's definitely what we've experienced here from time to time. People talking about they're using digital because they have to, not because they want to. It certainly was a thing during lockdown. People came online because there was no alternative. So they were coming online, building services and resources on top of fear and being scared of being cut off and being disconnected and losing services and losing money and
Mm.
resources and stuff. So yeah, it wasn't the best basis for building. I mean, John's idea of this show was about getting people to tell their stories of what had been happening to them, and I think we've kind of kept true to that to a large extent. Sharing stories of what we've discovered people have been doing and not doing, and then certainly in the work I do, people are always asking me, is there an alternative? And my work is to help them to use the digital platforms that are available, but also to lobby service providers to make sure that other alternatives are available because not everybody wants to be online for money reasons or for social reasons or for, I'd far rather go into the bank and talk to somebody over the counter and feel another human was understanding what I wanted to do than a machine that might or might not get it right. I might make a mistake. I'd rather do it with a human.
So I was at a small little conference run by a great organization called Basis last week, and they were talking about transactional design and relational design.
Hmm.
And they're writing a book on this, and when it comes out, I'll drop you a link to it. But
Hmm.
their thinking is that there are transactions which are simple, which are better done, which can be better done digitally. If someone is in a simple situation, then digital. But the moment someone's situation becomes complex rather than clear, then at that point you need a human in the loop, and it's that human that might do the clear things for them
Hmm.
because their life is simply too complex. And I was reminded of Kinevin, or however you pronounce it, Cynefin, my
Hmm.
favorite two by two management consultancy grid. Um, and the idea that when you are doing a simple transaction, a clear transaction, there are we know how to make those things simple, and we should just get on with making them simple. But we should, and in fact, and complicated situations, they might be reducible into something simple if you're clever enough and if your user research is good enough. But there are areas of complexity which are not the same as complicated areas, and for complexity, you need a human being.
Mm.
And
Which, yeah,
and building space for human relations into services so that you can deliver what you need to deliver strikes me as being a fruitful area of study, you know?
yeah. We've talked about digital champions on the program before, and like people who feel they can't deal with the something digital sometimes need a champion to help them show them how to do it. But I
Yeah.
also think champions can help them can do the thing and help them feel better that the thing has been done. They don't care. Like anybody, buying a product, often they don't mind where they get it from as long as they get the product. And I think similarly with digital services, people don't mind as long as the thing gets done and they have their appointment or they have their product or they have their service. So they don't necessarily have to have the skills themselves, as long as they have access to somebody else who can help them
Yeah,
with the
that's true.
skills. I think that's very important. The NHS app, actually, you remind me of what you've just been saying, is a classic one where the NHS is keen to move people on to use the app because it's going to be more convenient and cheaper for them. But a lot of people in the community are not so keen on it, partly because it's not working very well for them, I think. Um, Difficult to make appointments, difficult to get prescriptions and stuff like that. What's your kind of, can I put you on the spot and ask you about the NHS app, what your thoughts are about it?
You can. I will deflect you, because NHS not my area of expertise at all. My own, I'm pretty digitally savvy, and my own doctor's surgery has like a sort of a 1990s vintage online serve it yourself system, which does okay for repeat prescriptions, and that's what I need. So
Mm,
I'm happy enough because the transaction that I want is possible to do. And that's good enough for me.
mm,
I don't have any experience of the NHS app. I mean, in our work at Neontribe, we are entirely third sector. I do some bits and pieces of public sector work for DXW, but Neontribe is entirely third sector.
mm,
And at the moment, we are delivering. Currently, we're delivering a digital service to the Alexander Rose charity, which enables people which makes it easier for people to get fresh fruit and veg by using Alexander Rose vouchers. And that's a piece of work that I'm super proud of. And they are testing that with the NHS.
mm,
They've got some pilots out for fresh fruit and vegetables by prescription. And
mm,
that's something that I would love to see more of.
mm,
And that's an example, I guess, of where our third sector work does touch on the edges of some of these larger problems, which
mm.
agencies that aren't ours take a look at.
Yeah. I like I've seen some ideas coming from other countries. I comes into my mind, I might not be remembering this exactly correctly, but one where if people, go to a bus stop and to take, do 10 squats or something, they get the bus ride free or something like that.
Oh, I've
I
seen that.
like the
Yeah.
idea of that. Like
Yeah.
that gamifying the situation a bit so it's people don't feel so pressured because let's face it, digital can be very dull and serious and boring. And this is something I was saying at charity camp, Harry, no reflection on you, just that, a lot of things we do, oh God, can we not make it more fun? Can we not kind of lighten the
I
atmosphere
mean,
a bit?
one of the things I do outside of work is I'm an immersive experience designer, and like so building fun into that
Mm,
is meat and drink and part of it. Um, However, fun is actually hard to do. It's I've got friends all over the video game industry, and narrative design, experience design, all those things are actually tricky. We're currently working on a project for the National Citizenship Service, where we've got just over 3 months to deliver something which will help young people become more thoughtful consumers and users of AI,
mm,
which is like a really useful, a really interesting question to be working on. It's with friends at Cast, so Dan Such, who
mm,
we're talking about as one of the AI people
mm,
thinking over there. But we've got 3 months to do it. And some of the ideas that have come out of what the young people want to see are they'd like to see a game. Of course, they'd like to see a game. And in 3 months, delivering a game, that's just beyond what we can do in 3 months.
Mm, mm,
So when I was talking about user research at the beginning of this call, it's about working out what people need as opposed to saying, well, we should deliver what they want,
mm,
because what they want might well be way out of reach. And in fact, with something smaller, you might be able to get some benefit. And I'm all in favor of small experiments to get some benefit and then rolling out the ones that really work.
mm, definitely. Yeah.
I understand that that means that some of the ambition of what I tend to produce is a bit smaller, and that's a shame. I'd love to produce like a AAA standard video game that did something or other, that enabled people to, I don't know, see the world through the eyes of someone with someone with autism, or something like that. And you could do all of that with enough tech, but small nudges, small
Mm,
experiments
mm,
rolled out when they work. I
yeah.
think that's where I feel most comfortable.
I went to the Birmingham Open Media is a project based in Birmingham, has been for 10 years. They've just celebrated their 10th anniversary, and they did a project recently, or they showcased a project recently, of an American AR expert who was demonstrating a kind of a headset where you
Hmm.
put it on and you have a experience what it's like for someone else to be experiencing gender dysphoria, which I found very
Oh,
interesting. Yeah, it was very
the the
interesting.
um the app on that app, the piece of software and hardware on those lines, which I have always wanted to see, is a piece of hardware which allows me to see the world through the eyes of someone with a particular visual impairment.
Mm, mm,
Because I
yeah.
could imagine that with the right mathematics, you could give me the experience of red green colorblind, for example.
Mm,
And then we would go back to design and looking at a piece of design that we have done and just being able to not just know because the maths is different, but be able to experience that design through the eyes of someone with a visual impairment, or the eye or the hands of someone with some mobility impairment.
mm.
That would be gold being able to do that.
I can imagine people are working on that. Or an IB, I would have thought would be working on the visual impairment one anyway, because I know in the old days they would just slap a pair of goggles on you with Vaseline on them to simulate poor vision. But I'm sure probably somebody's working on that. If we find out about that, we'll invite them on the show. Harry, we're coming towards the end of the show, and I want to cover one story about remote digital champions, which I think might be good timing just before Christmas.
Yeah,
But
cool.
if people want to contact you after the show, um, because they're fascinated by what you're doing and they want to talk to you more, where's the best place to find you?
I am lucky enough in that the name Harry Harrold is almost unique. If you just search for Harry Harrold, you'll probably find me, unless
Hmm.
you bump into an American TV producer. That isn't
Ah,
me,
oh, that's
but
why you put on your blog, your socials that
it
you're not.
is
Yeah,
exactly. But
yeah.
you'll find me Harry Harrold at Blue Sky will find me. Harry Harrold at LinkedIn will get me. Harry at neontribe.co.uk will get me. And if you haven't, yes, and we are the kind of people who can make your digital services better. That's what we
Hmm.
do.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay, let me just cover this story and then you can comment on it if you like, and then we'll probably draw this show to a close. So this is from our friends at Digital Unite, and the title is "Being a Remote Digital Champion." And the post says, "Being online helps people stay safe, stay informed, and stay connected, but many still need help improving their skills and confidence to use digital technology. So when face-to-face support isn't possible, help can be given remotely via telephone, video call, email, or messaging, and they have a range of handy guides and top tips on being a remote digital champion to help make a digital difference to others, whatever the distance between you. And they have links which we will attach to this show guide to all the guides, and their guides include um, how to be a remote digital champion, getting started, helping others as a remote digital champion, top techniques, remote digital champions, safeguarding and online safety, helping others as a remote digital champion, essential tools and techniques, and getting ready for a remote session checklist, which is all sound very useful. They also have some webinars for people to watch where guest speakers have shared invaluable advice based on their hands-on experience of providing remote support. Remote support, is that something you've ever done, Harry? Is it something that
Well, not
interests
re
you?
it's not support, but we do remote usability testing of our services the whole
Mm,
time, and
mm,
it's made a dramatic difference to how many people we can talk to. Like if you are going to be doing all of these usability sessions face to face, you can only see as many people as you can get to, like geographically. But we found that it's entirely possible to do remote usability testing, and that means that we can see a much more diverse range of people, which is
mm.
really, really
Yeah,
crucial for us
yeah.
because we can see people from different parts of the country, different communities, just remotely. And once you get good at it, there is no reason you can't just get almost as much out of them.
Mm. So that's good to hear and good. Hopefully, we can encourage some people to be remote digital champions for their friends, family, neighbors, people in their community over Christmas, especially because when people get tech often for presents and we don't want them to find they haven't, it's bad enough having not having the batteries, but not being able to work the device because they just need a bit of a hand. Isn't very good. So let's encourage each other. I think everybody should see themselves as a digital champion anyway. And if you know somebody who's got digital skills, do give them a chance to help you. So welcome. Thanks for joining us on the show today, Harry. It was great
Pleasure.
to talk to you, and we look forward to having you again. And thanks for joining us, myself and Pauline and Sweyn. Please do join us in the green room afterwards, Harry, if you're not rushing
We'll do
off.
that.
Thanks for joining us, and have a great day. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Cheers. Bye bye.